It's no surprise that women characters in video games continue to be sexualized, but it should be surprising. As someone who grew up playing video games, my first being Black Ops 2 Zombies, I was introduced to a lot of explicit content at such a young age. I mean, it doesn't sound good talking about guns at 12 years old. There are what I'll call worries about video games that are persistent and have grown its presence past to the point where it becomes something to ignore. The common argument about video games is that it causes violence at a young age and so forth. But because of this, it overshadows some of the other worries that exist about video games. There is a lot to unpack, but we'll just take it one at a time. For this video, I'll be examining the hypersexualization of Asian woman characters and how these depictions exaggerates and distorts Asian women's identities and experiences. Without further ado, let's get into it. To really capture my argument in an understandable manner, let's dive into the game itself. Genshin Impact is an open world action role playing game developed and published by Hoyoverse in 2020, where players start to play as a separated twin trying to find their other half by journeying across different regions alongside Paimon, who becomes your companion at the very start. Together, as we progress, we're introduced to some pretty cool characters that later we're able to obtain and play as. Well, every character has their characteristics unique to them to help build lore and player attraction. What's so great about video games is there are lots of puzzle pieces that make a game unique to its own, whether that be the art style, genre, mechanics, or even just the characters. With Genshin Impact, one of the main parts of being able to enjoy this game is the characters themselves. As players, we all have different attractions for a character's aesthetics. But what is Genshin Impact doing specifically to lure players into playing their game? Well, one factor comes from their character designs, and what it's doing is it's sexualizing their women characters. Before I get started, what do I mean by sexualization? Well, I mean by creating characters done to appeal towards a specific audience. Can we take a guess at who that is? I'll give you a hint. This can also be best understood by the gaze. Now, as mysterious as it sounds, it actually is as it implies. In 1989, the book Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema was released by Laura Mulvey, a feminist film theorist and filmmaker contributing to discussions with approaches regarding varying attributes of motion pictures. Basically, meaning her line of work is dabbling with big questions and discussions about a film's attributes through conceptual frameworks to better understand a film's relationship with reality, viewers, and society. Fun fact, because of her work alongside others, she was able to shift the orientation of film theory towards a more psychoanalytic frameworks, which also brought awareness to the intersectionality of film theory, psychoanalysis, and feminism. Because of her work, the term male gaze or the gaze was then introduced to film critiques. The gaze is a result of a film's ability to direct our way of seeing with the assumption of heterosexuality, which illuminates the binary between men, who control the gaze, and women, who are objects of the gaze. With the context of video games, what you'll soon see is how video games are replicating this binary through pervasive representations of hypersexualized Asian women. Now, I want to say a lot of my analysis on these character designs come from information provided by users Atheldi and Lupical Helper EN over at HoYoLab website. Let me show you some examples of what I'm really talking about, starting with Rosaria. Rosaria's outfit was custom made by the Favinus Cathedral, a church located in Mondstadt, making Rosaria a sister. She wears a nun's habit, which is a three-piece set including a tunic, a belt, and a veil. With Rosaria's design, she is wearing a crown that a black veil is attached to. She wears a sleeveless white and black one piece that resembles a swimsuit with fishnet leggings and long white gloves and a black and red skirt with slits on both sides, starting from her waistline, exposing her left leg more than her right. If we take a look at NPCs, which are non playable characters, they are more closely designed to the traditional religious habit. Of course, Rosaria's design will be different because she is a playable character. It's quite obvious that playable characters will look different from extras. Rosaria's outfit is a nun's habit, but it's presented with different pieces of clothing, making it non-traditional. The power of being a playable character is that the character themselves doesn't have to accurately look like what they're supposed to be, hence the slits and the different exposures on her body. Rosaria isn't the only one who wants to show off her long legs, but Yae Miko too. She has a variety of different design elements that are inspired by Shintoism, an old religious belief meaning the way of the gods, and Inari Okami, which refers to Japanese kami of fertility, foxes, rice, tea, and sake, and is also a principle of Shinto. Her outfit itself is inspired by Shinto Miko costumes, where the upper part of her costume is a white kasore, a direct predecessor of the kimono, and the lower part is a red hakama, which is usually tied at the waist and falls to the ankle. Yae Miko's role in the game also has an impact on her design, as she is the head lady of Guji's Grand Narukami Shrine in Inazuma. Similarly to Rosaria, Yae Miko's outfit is inspired by Shinto Miko costumes, but is physically different from the traditional costume. By taking part of the kasore so that the sleeves are separate from the body to reveal her shoulders, and the hakama, which is usually tied around the body with the kasore tucked in, with Yae Miko's design, the hakama is underneath the kasore and is stopped around her waist to expose her long legs, furthering her physical appeal. Yae Miko's design isn't the only character that holds status in story. Let me introduce you to Yoimiya. When looking at Yoimiya's costume, we can see that in her hair is a tamari ball. Tamari balls were originally from China, but then were introduced to Japan. They were created by remnants of old kimonos and several pieces of fabric that are then assembled together, which slowly form the shape of a sphere. The small lines of fabric on the outside was wrapped to ensure the shape. The word tamari means handball and historically was a game for young girls, but over time it became a Japanese art form due to the utilization of its bright colors and beautiful embroidery designs. Tamari balls have significant value as it symbolizes deep friendship and loyalty, but also wishing for the recipient a fulfilling life. Tamari balls are also worn during special occasions like New Year's and festivals, which makes sense for Yoimiya because her character is based around her family's business, providing fireworks for various celebrations in Inazuma, one of them mainly for festivals. Yoimiya is wearing a bright red and orange kimono with a firework-like pattern. Her left sleeve hangs off her shoulder to expose her bandaged undergarment. Her shoes are inspired by wooden clogs, which are usually worn during festival season paired with a yukata. With all of this combined, we can see that the bright colors and different components reflect her background and cultural well. Yoimiya's design is sexualized because of her one off-shoulder kimono, which reveals her undergarment, indicating to the players that that is all she is wearing. But Yoimiya isn't the only one wearing an undergarment, so is Ganyu. Ganyu's character design is inspired by Chinese mythology, Qilin, which is a rare animal that looked like a deer with a cow's tail, horse hooves, and a horn made out of flesh on its head. In the game, Ganyu is half human and half adepti, so being half and half, it could explain Ganyu's horns on the top of her head. She wears a copper bell, which is to ward off evil and negative energy while ensuring safety. On the left side of her waist, she wears a red string knot. Historically, these red string knots come in different shapes and were worn as good luck charms to ward off evil spirits. But now, over time, it became decorations for homes, during festivals, and can be found with jewelry and other clothing. Ganyu's white dress has her sleeves detached to reveal her shoulders. With her black bodysuit underneath, her white dress cups under her breasts. The front of her dress stops at the bottom of her pelvic area, with slits on both sides to reveal her legs and figure. The slitting of the dress, similar to Rosaria, brings attention to Ganyu's legs. The small dress around her breast emphasizes her breast by making it pop out more. Shen-yi is another character with design aspects similar to Ganyu. With a black bodysuit underneath and pieces of fabric, Shen-yi's design also holds aspects of Chinese culture. Her design consists of various red string embellishments throughout: the bow in her hair, crossing around her body, and the knot earrings. Similarly to the red knot we spotted in Ganyu's design, Shen-yi's hold the same purpose of warding off evil spirits and disasters. We see that the outfits presented were heavily influenced by their culture and their role in the game, but are sexualized to increase their physical attractiveness towards players. In a faraway place where there exists an alternate reality to Earth, we'll be landing in Honkai Impact 3rd, a video game part of a series under Hoyoverse. Honkai Star Rail is a spin off of Honkai Impact 3rd, but a completely different game. For the purpose of this video, I'll be dabbling in both but will clearly distinguish the different games. In addition to Genshin Impact, with Honkai Impact 3rd, the design of the characters fall under sexual objectification. I'll show you what I mean. Here we have Tomino. Here we have Alacia, Vilvi, and of course, saving the best for last, Aponia. I mean, need I say more? Unlike Genshin Impact, where they are releasing characters, Honkai Impact 3rd has a set number of characters, but releases different battle suits for their characters, which are different but special suits that are paired with a weapon to enhance a player's ability and perk. For example, let's take the character Kiana Kaslana. This is her default design, but some of her battle suits include Divine Prayer, Void Drifter, Hersher of the Void, and Night Moonbeam. Though these battle suits look cool, they're sexualizing the characters too. In a similar sense, in the characters from Genshin Impact, the character designs in Honkai Impact 3rd are designed in a way to boost their physical appearance that sexually objectifies them. And some other examples, like PE's Platinus Equinox battlesuit, she wears a sleeveless one-piece bodysuit with shorts, with the middle part being a mesh-like material. Under her breast is a rib-like belt that has fabric attached, mimicking the bottom half of a dress, wearing a strap around her left thigh and different length boots. Her bodysuit is fitted to define her body figure and shape. The middle part reveals her cleavage, further defining her breasts. The diamond slit reveals her stomach, and the fabric attached only reaches the bottom of her bodysuit. Taking a look at Alicia's Hersher of Human Ego battlesuit, she wears a one-piece bodysuit that resembles a swimsuit. On her arms, she wears armbands with flowy white fabric that matches the rest of her outfit, with white formal gloves and tall boots that reach below her knees. The one piece has slits on both sides of her body that starts from under her breast to her hips, with the bottom part of her one piece wrapped around the very top of her thighs. She has this jeweled piece that hangs on the left side of her rib cage with the fabric flowing from underneath, but it doesn't do much but add more aesthetic visuals. If we take a look at Thelma's Mad Pleasure Shadowbringer battlesuit, she wears a red jacket with bell-shaped ruffle sleeves. Her jacket is attached with a big bow at the breast and flares open with black gloves. She wears black low-waisted shorts and heel boots with a ruffle design, having the left boot up to her thigh. The choice of having her jacket split open from the start of her breast out exposes her torso down. She wears low-waisted shorts, which only covers this part of her body and continues to expose the rest, which are her legs. A lot of these battlesuits are just varying outfits for aesthetic purposes, because how can this protect you from fighting against this? To be a woman in video games is to be hot and sexy while fighting bad guys. Oh, and to make sure the boobs jiggle ever so slightly. Last time I checked, I didn't know Victoria's Secret was selling battlesuits. In 1976, the first ever fighting game was an arcade game called Heavyweight Champ. It's claimed that this game was the first to include a hand-to-hand playstyle, which set the stage for future hand-to-hand fighting games like Yi R Kung Fu, The Way of the Exploding Fist, and other popular games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Soul Calibur. If we look at Rainbow Mika, she has two pigtails and wears a blue and white skin-tight one-piece garment that covers the body, which is called a leotard. Her design is supposed to make her more flamboyant, meaning she stands out from the wrestling bulls. There are circular openings on her chest area, back, both sides of her thighs, torso, shoulders, knees, and elbows. Her inspiration stems from another character in the game, Sanjeev. Next up, we have Izmaki. When examining her design, we can see that she is tall. Her hair is slicked back into a ponytail, and she wears a red female ninja garb, just without the sleeves and the leg coverings. And she also has matching red underwear. Then we have Sakura. One of her alternate outfits nostalgia is of her in a high school uniform. Along with the other characters, a lot of their design also reflects their abilities in the game, as their clothing is loose and not very fitted to allow for faster movement. But I mean, it's just like what we saw in Honkai Impact 3rd, where characters are dressed in lingerie. Katana, Jade, and Melina fall victim to it. But there are characters like Chun-Li, for example, who don't seem to be wearing any of the lingerie I've discussed with other characters. One variation of her outfit is a blue qipao, which is a particular dress worn by women in China. But her qipao is shortened to her thighs and is less restricted by having slits on both sides to allow for movement of her legs, because her fighting style utilizes her muscular legs. Underneath, she wears a sheer brown pantyhose with tall white boots. Another popular variation of her outfit is a blue unitard underneath a cropped vest with athletic shoes. These variations of her character designs differ based on the game, but we can see that her fitted clothing defines her shape, especially her legs and waist. Even in the first variation of her outfit, the main focus goes towards her legs. We can also see this in Soul Calibur with Taki, who wears a skin-tight red full bodysuit with samurai-like chest armor that hugs around her breast area. Have you noticed that all the characters I've discussed have something in common with each other? Well, all of these characters are identified as Asian women. Now, I'm not saying that it's only Asian female characters that are being sexualized, because it's all women characters regardless of their background. But there is a racialized layer to the sexualization of female characters in video games that I want to emphasize. Celine Pereña's Shimizu's bondage framework states that Asian and Asian American women often face a particular type of representation, one that emphasizes inappropriate attributes. This is a persistent theme in media that inaccurately reflects Asian and Asian American women's experiences and identity. This is known as hypersexualization. Well, what does this mean? If we take a trip to Hollywood, Asian characters in the industry face stereotypes, limited casting roles, and underrepresentation, just to name a few. We often understand Asian characters to be kung fu fighters, China dolls, or lotus blossoms, even dragon ladies, the model minority, the nerd, or even depicted as geishas. Even so, all of these stereotypes are exaggerating the realities of Asian and Asian American individuals. Historically, films have harbored these racial stereotypes as a reflection of historical social issues like gender, race, class, and sexuality, to name a few. And as a result, Asian women are depicted for us viewers to acknowledge and associate attributes to real Asian women. Though I want to acknowledge that the portrayals of Asian women are progressing away from the negative portrayals, it doesn't outweigh the persistent challenges that Asian women in Hollywood continuously face. In similar aspects, video games share the same experience. Character designs of Asian women are feeding into the hypersexualization of Asian and Asian American women by utilizing the female body with clothes that render them to be subjected through sexual gazes. And because they're targets of sexualization, there's a possibility that some will suffer disproportionate harms or burdens on the basis of their race due to the false representations in their identity. As a gamer myself, something that I love is engaging with the video game content on the outside, like on social media, community blog, and forums. It's a great way to get more out of the video game and even meeting other players. Some extra content include official art of characters, short films, or even fan art. This is where we see the gaze take effect, because if we take a closer look at games like Genshin Impact and Honkai, visually we see the characters in suggestive poses which further sexualizes them in banners. Banners is a game mechanic that offers players a chance to obtain the character, which then the player can play as in-game. For Genshin Impact, one example can be seen with Raiden's banner, as her silhouette curves as she's pulling a sword out from between her breasts. This is accurate to her ultimate ability that she does in the cinematics and in game. For Honkai, one example can be seen with Thelma, as her silhouette is holding her weapon above her head. This pose is common with Ivy from Soul Calibur 6, as her silhouette can be seen holding her weapon above her head as well. And Honkai Star Rail, specifically characters like Black Swan, Tingyun, and Sparkle, all have an up-down perspective on their character banners, with Black Swan and Tingyun's being similar with the slightly raised leg, arms above the head, all whilst laying down looking up. Sparkle's banner is instead of her sitting down with her hand reaching out and her legs slightly crossed but with no shoes. With some art outside of banners, there is official art that is on the internet that just shows who the character is. Most of the time, it's in a simple stance. Other times, it will be through different poses too. Like in Street Fighter, some of Maki's poses consist of her holding up her hair in a ponytail, which accentuates her height. Sometimes we see her squatting. And another example, Aki's silhouette is with her squatted on her knees, with one arm raised and her back facing the camera. I make the argument that how these characters are being presented further sexualizes them, and that's because of their body language. Well, you know the idiom actions speak louder than words? Well, yeah, it's true, because such poses are linked to sex or seduction. Some will argue that they're just posing, but I believe that it's hard to separate just posing from the context that it's so deeply rooted in. If we take Maggie, I mean, it's just her holding her hair up, right? An action that is common among those with long hair who like to tie it up with the purpose of keeping it away from their face. But because it has a strong association to girls that tie their hair up so it won't get in the way of oral sex, it can't be seen as a function to keep one's hair in place. This is prominent especially when it comes to Asian women because of the way the gaze has harbored stereotypes of Asian women in films and television to be for sex throughout the years. We see this in video games as the silhouettes of these characters reflect the phenomenon that society has consumed from older media, like what we see in Playboy magazines, the world of Susie Wong, and in Ex Machina. When it comes to video games, utilizing an Asian woman's body is a way for financial success. Let me further explain what I mean. I described these games the way I perceive them to be, but I should have mentioned that games like Genshin Impact and Honkai fall under the gacha game category. Gacha games refer to the mechanism of spending money on in game currencies for a chance at obtaining random in game prizes. For Genshin Impact, it's buying Genesis crystals which can be converted to Primogems. These Primogems are then used on character banners. Characters are an important aspect to these games because it's how you're able to complete challenges, domains, and fight off enemies. So Genshin Impact and Honkai Impact Third utilizes their character designs and visual presentations to lure players into spending real-life currency on their game. Gacha games like Genshin Impact are dominated by 55% of male players, which results in designing their female characters in a sexualized manner in order to gain financial success. Even outside the gacha genre, video games use similar tactics to gain player popularity. One of the main arguments made about video game mechanics is that it adds some sort of realistic element to the game, but I always felt like that argument was just bad. For one, breast physics, also known as chisel physics, it's essentially having the female character's breasts bounce or move and is oftentimes exaggerated. In both Genshin Impact and Honkai, players who play an adult woman character will notice that their breasts move quite a lot, whether it's running, walking. I would argue that it's here where it's done to objectify women because of how much exaggeration there is. I mean, look at it. There is no realism here. I mean, if jiggle physics exists, why not disperse it to both parties? Why don't male characters have their bulges or even their butts jiggle? Then there's character customization. Personally, I love a good character customization option because it's fun and it can reflect who I am as a player in the virtual world. It brings out personality and uniqueness to cooperative games and adds a more connected experience. For me, what customization looks like is being able to alter phenotypic traits and style. For some games, it ranges to how freely the customization will look like or how limiting it will be. It becomes a wishy washy slope because on one end of the rope, there will be those who fight for the inclusivity of varying body types that is reflected from the real world, and on the other hand of the rope, there will be people who fight for how it can be damaging to those affected. When I refer to customization, I refer to the customization like what we see in Soul Calibur 3 and 4. A study done by Rachel Hutchinson had 55 undergraduate students play video games to complete a given worksheet, recording their experience as a player and observer, personally and with provided academic material regarding the representation of gender and whether stereotypes have any effect of a player's immersion in the game. What was found was that the character customization could alter a character's original design, which minimized or limited assumed gender stereotypes, but in return, players can inflict stereotypes of their own. In this study, a disparity arose when students noted the differences between changing the physique of a male character versus the physique of the female character. With male characters, there was more customization variety, but for female characters, the only customization was in terms of breast sizing. I want to argue that jiggle physics and customizations like we see in Soul Calibur 3 and 4 shouldn't need it to be added in order to make a game more realistic. It adds no value to the gameplay itself and it serves for aesthetic purposes only. Look at Game of the Year, based on the tabletop fantasy role playing system of Dungeons and Dragons.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Before playing the game, players are allowed to customize and personalize their own character, even choosing their class. What I want to draw focus on is the customization in itself. When personalizing your character, there are lots of options that you can choose from. What makes it great is that the customization is equal to all. Meaning, if you're personalizing a female character, the changes you alter can also be the same changes on a male character. The problem isn't character customization, the problem is what the character customization is. As players, we're experiencing the unrealistic and hypersexualized bodies of Asian women through physics and customization. And some arguments will claim that there are even females who play these games who are also drooling over the same characters. So, what exactly is the problem? Well, the problem is because it is only going one way, that the unequal treaty is higher towards females than it is males. Since 1982, video games have been a form of entertainment open to all, but because it's been stigmatized and associated with being an activity that males do, the perception becomes limited towards male audiences, which results in marketing, design choices, gameplay mechanics, and much more catering towards male players. With video games like Genshin Impact, Honkai, Street Fighter, and probably many more, they contribute to the existing oppressive standards that Asian women are judged and valued for how well they can conform to such standards, rather than their individuality, ability, and intellect, which renders Asian women to become vulnerable to sexualized racial types and have to deal with the psychological burden generated by having to cope with how Asian women are being depicted within these video games. Just a little bit of what I wanted to discuss ties with the overall premise of this video, because if it wasn't enough, let me add more. Video games like Genshin Impact and Honkai are designed with what I call the anime aesthetic. No, I didn't make this term up, but I believe it fits very well. Basically, it's an art style inspired by manga art and anime art that includes features of big eyes, a flattened face, white skin, skinny body types, and is Japanese, which makes sense because this art style originates from Japan. For example, in Honkai, if we take a look at a handful of characters and take away everything else besides their faces, they all look the same. It's hard to distinguish if these characters are ethnically different from being Japanese. In Genshin Impact, it's a bit easier to tell because of the variety of clothing styles that are influenced by the regions of where they're from. However, we see that her skin is white. This is something that we see with other characters like Kandake, another character from Sumeru. Her design draws inspiration from Egypt. Her name is based on the title of Sundanese ancient Nubian queen, Kandake. Her costume draws from the Kush kingdom, which is heavily influenced by Egyptian culture. But Kandake herself is a light tan, a tan that we see in other characters like Dea, Sino, Sethos, and Shinyan. And so, despite all the details that may differ them from being Japanese, they're still created under the certain beauty standard. I'm not dissing the level of detail that went into each character design because as a Genshin Impact player myself, it has been pretty cool to research the different components of just a single character's design. However, by taking inspiration of various cultures and the people of these cultures without creating characters of darker complexions, it's not representing the different cultural backgrounds as best as it could be. Like people on the internet reacted so negatively with Lisa's new comeback, she's Thai and has always been of a darker complexion, but when she was part of the former group Blackpink, she was whitewashed. Despite it all, it continuously reinforces that white is the beauty standard and it's whitewashing Asian culture and Asian women. I will say it has been hard to distinguish what makes for the gaze and how Asian women can feel empowered of their bodies and sexuality. Working on this project, I have been going back and forth between the two, but I believe there is further research that can be done to do so. Making this video was only just the start. Before I end off, I want to address some arguments made against topics and relating points I shared in this video with you all by stating how fictional these games are, meaning they're not real because they're fantasy. Because of this overwhelming argument, it overshadows other underlying worries that exist within these video games. Therefore, causing very few to little discussions about these problems. I believe we should take these games seriously to some level. Some of the best games often focused on the tiniest of details, and if they're able to do extensive research in making sure such detail is right, if they're continuously taking inspiration from real cultures and real people, then to some extent it is real. Just like reading a romantic novel, it's often an alternate reality to our own, meaning to some level, the events that occur in the book can occur in the real world because it somehow shapes our perceptions of love, our standards of what we look for in a partner, and what we want in our own life. If it's just fiction, and if we establish that fiction isn't real, then why do some people get off to these characters? I mean, when Overwatch 2 was released on Steam, the reviews were bombarded with negative comments about how bad the game is. But some of the common arguments made were discussing how the porn of Overwatch 2 is a lot better than the game itself. Though this is an example, a lot of video games who promote their characters bridge themselves to porn. Real men are finding pleasure within themselves to these fictional characters, so to some extent, then it is real. I believe this is to be understood through player preference and what we like and dislike about video games. But similarly to what our preferences are for video games, it can be reflected in preferences we have for people that we're attracted to. Someone's racial and ethnic background matters because it's a major part of their physicality, all of which is what other people see when they look at you. In video games, players can see everything about the character along with consuming additional content like dialogue, audio story, and cutscenes that is obtained from playing the game. So by internalizing all of this, we're altering our own perceptions of Asian women and potentially what we're attracted to, either platonically or romantically. I was sort of talking my head off this entire time, and there was a lot of information I wanted to share with you all based on the research I have done over this summer. If you didn't get it all, that's okay. Here's some of the main takeaways I'd like to leave you with. As players, we're witnessing the hypersexualization of Asian women through different video game characters from video games like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Street Fighter, and Soul Calibur. Specifically from the character designs, presentations, and functionality in the game itself being physics and character customization. The depictions of Asian women are also limited to beauty standards of whiteness. We analyzed how video games like Genshin Impact and Honkai are created with the anime aesthetic that promotes white to be more compelling, while also whitewashing Asian women and cultures which flattens different ethnic backgrounds into a monolith. Asian and Asian American women are targets of sexualization, which can have a psychological burden on the individual and feel depersonalized. You can have hot looking characters without it underlyingly feeding into stereotypes of Asian women. We should consider how fiction affects our perceptions of real life and take it seriously to some level. All points in which these video games and probably other video games outside of what I've discussed today are enforcing when deciding the production and creation of Asian women characters, furthering to limit the definitions of race, representation, and sexuality. If you made it this far, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my video. If you'd like to share your thoughts with me, please do. My topic is really broad and it's hard to limit my scope. I definitely probably miss things that could be related and I'm still learning as I go. This project is just a step forward. Well, that's all for now. Bye bye!